So thank you again for coming tonight. Just want to do a quick recap for those who might not have been as involved in the beginning of this study. The primary focus of this study is to look at the existing conditions and potential improvements to the Junior Sail Beach Community Center, Pier Amphitheater and Bandshell, and the Pier Plaza in between. As you will see in tonight's presentation, we have a lot of information to share. There are some constraints that are associated with the site, and so we will delve into that. We have numerous options we'd like to present to you. Nothing's committed, they're just potential options, but we're looking at what those options could be for the entire study area. Louder. How's that? Is that better? Okay. Do you want me to start over? Were you able to? Okay, thank you. So with that, just wanted to give you a brief recap. I'm going to defer to Steve from Johnson Fogro, who is our consultant lead on this project. I want to thank you in advance. We have a lot of information to share, a lot to show you, and I think it's about a 30+ minute presentation. After that, we're really interested in breaking up and having some conversations about these potential options and hearing your feedback. So with that, I'll defer to Steve and we'll begin.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be back with all of you. I do see a lot of people, a lot of familiar faces, and many of you are probably tired of hearing me say almost the same thing for many, many presentations. I guarantee you tonight is a lot different, a lot of information to share with you. So to sort of dive right in, as I should say though first that joining me tonight is my business partner Jim Favreau right over there, and we have several members of our office team as well that you're going to be meeting throughout the evening when we break up into group discussions. Hold on, for some reason this isn't advancing. So as Dara said, this is a workshop format. So we're going to start with a 35-minute presentation with me tonight, and then we're going to break up into groups within the room. And if we need to, we can spill into the courtyard to facilitate that. But we have the opportunity, if it need be, to divide into 5 groups so that we can have essentially a 30-minute conversation with you, can actually get into detail with smaller groups. We're going to allow 5 minutes to kind of reassemble, or I say break up into the groups, and then 5 minutes at the end to reassemble. And then we're going to come back, and spokespersons for each group that you will choose will actually report back to the larger group what you said and what was heard and what were the feelings that were expressed in that group. And then we'll wrap up with about 15 minutes of question and answer and a brief talk about next steps going forward. Tonight's purpose is really pretty simple in some ways, even though there's a lot of information. We are, as Dara said, right at the beginning of option development. And so we really are going to present to you some options that we have put together for the study site. And really what we need from you is, based on what you see, is to let us know what works, what doesn't work, what did we miss, and really key is suggestions for improvement. It's really easy to just say no, but it's much more helpful to us as we move forward in this process to understand how things can improve and go forward. And I do want to stress one thing. The key words in this project or study is the word study and the word options in this phase. So this is truly a study. There's no final decisions coming from this, and it's neither my decision to make. It is really you as a community and your elected leadership. So everything you're going to see tonight is an option. And I stress that word. These are not final decisions. They are really things to put before you and get your feedback. And then the second part of that is really the issue that it is a study. So this is not a design. You're seeing concepts, not a full design, but you're seeing what is the beginning of establishing the scope of what, if it does ever go forward in the future, and nothing is mandated, that it really has a kind of framework to go forward into future phases that truly get into design. So I did want to stress that. To remind everybody of the boundaries of the study site, North Pacific sort of forms the eastern boundary, the Strand obviously the western boundary, with the community center at the north end, and Betty's lot to the southern end of the site. And the goals of this study is for us, with you, to understand the needs and community priorities associated with this important critical site and the facilities that are on that site, and also understand the current condition of those facilities, of both the site and the facility. So that's a key part of what we have been doing with you. But simply put, this is really planning for future capital projects that are coming your way. It's just a fact that buildings and infrastructure do deteriorate. You know that with your own homes. If you wait till the last minute when the plumbing goes and you don't have plans, you don't know how much things cost, you don't know what you're going to do, you're kind of in an emergency situation. This is really just setting up a planning framework. It doesn't mandate doing anything. That's your choice, when and how you proceed. But it really gives you the information that you need in order to effectively plan for when there might be repairs, renovation, enhancement of these facilities. So our job with you is to understand the potential, and I emphasize that, the potential scope and budget of those future projects, if indeed they ever come along. We do have a cost estimating consultant on our team, and they will be, as soon as we gather some of the information we get from you tonight and begin to refine some of the options, narrow them down, consider what they actually will be, that cost estimator will help us with defining for you accurate project costs, because that's a key part of that, knowing what things cost, and even the cost to actually produce the projects and, quite frankly, even run and sustain them. And we will, as we will tonight, talk with you very clearly about advantages and disadvantages. Back to that word options. There are options, but they have some advantages and some have other advantages. And we'll be clear about that tonight and going forward and throughout this process in this phase. I want to say at the outset, I said it many times during the discovery phase, we are well aware that this is public open space. End of story, simply put. We will never present an option on this site with other uses than what is there. Public open space, community center, community recreation, and amphitheater events. There are no other programs planned for, and parking that's currently there. There are no other programs planned for this site. We are not proposing any, nor will we do so. This is public open space. And these are public resources to be used by the community. So we are going to present to you through this phase a range of options to give you, the community, flexibility to implement what you want to do, when you want to do it, and how you want to do it. This is, again, just a framework. It doesn't mandate a time. It doesn't mandate even doing it. This planning study could sit as a doorstop and not do anything if it ends up that way. But we hope that it's a framework for really thoughtful decision-making as you are faced with decisions on any aspect of this important site. But I do want to add, I think it's critical. Jim and I do a lot of public work, and things don't happen unless there's consensus and support for them to happen from you. So we hope that this process, that we together can build a consensus, actually build enthusiasm for what might come in the future when that day may come. I do want to remind people, I saw some people in the room who were talking to me, we did have an extensive outreach phase, 10 community meetings, all of your commissions and committees we presented to between August and December of 2021. And there is a discovery phase report and a facilities condition assessment that will be soon on the website for you to review and go over the findings of that phase. And next steps, just super briefly, following this meeting, we plan to go to Parks and Rec Commission on June 7th. And then we are proposing a second community meeting like this. We'll come back to you. This is the first of 2 in this phase. We'll come back to you. We're proposing possibly June 30th, but that date's not totally confirmed. That will be confirmed, but sometime in that end of June timeframe. And then going back after that, with that input from you at the second meeting, going back to Parks and Rec on July 12th. All of this aiming towards, again, a tentative date of a city council study session, perhaps sometime in August. So I think it's also important to step back. I know I heard a lot, and I said many times that I heard something new almost every one of those presentations. You were bored hearing me. I know I said the same thing for 10 presentations, but I heard something new every presentation. Just a quick summary. These are kind of from my notes and things that I heard. We heard so clearly, do not change a thing. And what that means really is that the love you have for these facilities, the history that's tied to them, the feelings that are tied to them, and the families that are here and that have used these facilities over generations. We know that and we heard that. And I think that's the sentiment behind Don't Change a Thing. You love it. This is your home. This is your city. And these are your facilities. So we heard just fix them up and open them up, please. Please open them for access. Why are they closed? We heard certain frustration connected to that. But in those same meetings, I did hear some people say, I'm open to some creative thinking. People said, make use of the roofs. Make what you will of that. Others said, yes, it needs better event lighting and sound systems, clearly about the band shell and the amphitheater. So there you're kind of seeing and acknowledge it, keep it the same, keep what we know and love, but yeah, there can be improvements. There are things that have to happen here that bring these facilities up to current standards. The next one is something that particularly resonated with me. And we heard from quite a few people at quite a few meetings. I should not have to drive to Melba Bishop for, and you fill in the blank, for that class, that community recreation class, for that fitness class, for whatever class that might be offered at Melba Bishop, but for some reason is not offered at the Beachfront Community Center. That shouldn't be. It's kind of old-fashioned thinking that we have all of our facilities in one place and we all have to get in the car and drive to it. People live at the beachfront, as you do, and it should be as it is now. You should have those facilities at the beachfront for your use. And Arlene said to me about every single meeting, I think every single meeting, or said to the group, do not renovate the community center, meaning take down the use of the existing courts until you have built more courts. And that was a reflection of this feeling that there were basically a deficit of court space in the city of Oceanside. And so that was just saying how precious that court is. Don't renovate that building and shut it down for a period of months when we have such a deficit of courts in this city. We certainly know that Oceanside is special. And we heard very clearly, and I know what this means, we are not Santa Monica. You are not San Diego. You're not even Carlsbad. You are Oceanside. And there's a very particular character to Oceanside that we need to know. Now, that's more getting into the specifics of design. And this, as I said, is not a design phase. That's an intensive phase where you go through many more options than I'm even going to show you to get at the look and the feel and the character of Oceanside, which is often, as I've been told, characterized as real California, meaning California as it used to be. And so there's a very special character here that it's hard to get to in this concept study. We take design quite seriously, but there is a special character that we know you care about that reflects what Oceanside is, feels like, and is to you. We clearly know what that means to say we're not Santa Monica. I think Santa Monica looks like Copenhagen now. I don't think it looks like California. So we get that as architects. We also know there are certain third rails here. I mean by that these are things, pressures on this community that have resulted in a lot of frustration and indeed anger. This feeling of being displaced, of the forces of gentrification and the forces of kind of new land use that's happening all the time, and how the land is being developed. It doesn't feel like it's for you. And people actually feel priced out of some of the things that are being happening there. And that's particularly relevant here because, again, these are public facilities for the public, for free. And so I think there was certainly a fear that somehow in all of this change, there would be a change to that attitude for the public. But it's just an acknowledgement that we've heard quite clearly the pressures of gentrification have affected this community in a very important and serious way. And there has been prior to me even becoming a part of this project, a history and lack of trust that I think has to be acknowledged for us to be successful and effective going forward. Outsiders, I was an outsider. I am an outsider. I will never be an Oceansider, but I will try my best to know the city and to know you, and hope we do that. But I think that there's a feeling that how can outsiders possibly know what we can do here? But there were also operational issues, staff issues, questions about parks and recreation in general and staffing there. We have to acknowledge that that was a part of the discussion back in that phase that affects us moving forward successfully. It may not be the purview of our project, but we heard you loud and clear that there are other issues related to that. And there was even a kind of question about the political decision-making. How was the decisions on this project going to happen back in some closed room? You know, who's cooking all of this up? There were all these questions, and I'm acknowledging to you, we heard loud and clear, there's a certain amount of one level potential distrust, but skepticism about the decision-making process that we do have to acknowledge if we want to be successful going forward. So to jump right in with the options, we're going to start in with the Junior Sao Pier Amphitheater and Band Shell. First, something you know very well, I said it perhaps a few times, but the existing condition of the concrete in its current state of repair does need to be repaired because it will continue to deteriorate. So this is what I'm talking about, planning for the future. What do you actually do for the day of how you repair it? But the issue of repairing a facility like that, the magnitude of repairing all of that concrete, you simply can't do it unless you address accommodation and access for the disabled. You can't spend that amount of money without updating it to current accessibility standards. And so what that means, we know with the current occupancy of the amphitheater that we need at minimum 13 wheelchair seats within that facility. And we need to distribute them. You can't put them all at the top and you can't put them all at the bottom. You've got to spread them out like able-bodied throughout the venue. You can't say you're going to sit here and we're all going to be able to go to the stage and do all these great things. You have to distribute it through the facility. And then just even the geometric configuration of someone in a wheelchair, we have to take into account that a seated wheelchair has to be able to see over standing patrons in front of them. So you can see right there, there's a kind of geometry to the steps of an amphitheater that accommodate the disabled, or particularly those in a wheelchair as they're at a performance. We simply have to take care of that with the repair of this facility. I had many people in the first thing say, I may not be disabled, but I'm a little older and it's a little harder to get up and down those steps. And I need that, I need those improvements as we go forward. So this is a cross section of the amphitheater with North Pacific on the left, Strand on the right. If we're cutting a knife through the amphitheater, there you see the profile of the stepped seating down to the plaza level and the band shell. But it essentially has to be rebuilt in this way so that I can have wheelchair seating at the high level as member equivalency, and wheelchair seating at the mid-level, and wheelchair seating at the stage level. I need to provide that accommodation within that, but it's not just that. With current codes, there are things connected with aisle width in terms of safety. I think many of you have probably been in the amphitheater, and if you have to leave in a hurry, and imagine getting out of those narrow aisles, it's not as safe as current standards would require. So there actually are code requirements in terms of the number of people in a row and how wide the aisle is to get by them. So we simply have to change what we call the rake, or the steepness, if you will, of the amphitheater to bring it up to current code. And that's also an issue of comfort. Just to say, and we heard that as well, make the facility more comfortable as well as we potentially move through it. The band shell itself is about 24 feet tall. And you can see in this image, it's doing incredible work, but often the infrastructure that supports event just kind of has to hover and be hung outside of the existing band shell. You see the speakers there on the left, equipment's always kind of moving outside of the stage volume. Clearly, rigging has to often be built for just the simple function of getting lighting on a performer's face at the stage front. So you have to, every time that happens, build the rigging, bring in the lighting, bring the speakers. It's very typical of the kind of events, whether they're community events or actually concerts and other kinds of events, that basically there is overhead rigging supplied that supplies the lighting and the sound equipment already generally in place so that you're not building that rigging over and over again. And you see, you've had many occasions where the rigging exceeds the height of the band shell itself, the equipment spreading out to the edges, and even the creation of what we call a sound mix station to control the audio and the visual connected with any event has to be created each time. As we consider what we do with repairing this amphitheater, how to bring it forward to accommodate the technology that supports the community events, supports the festivals you currently have there, as well as the other events that's a necessary part of this. So we do have a theater consultant on our team, and he gave a recommendation, and I want to emphasize, this is just a recommendation. This is not a hard and fast rule, but he gave a recommendation of a stage volume, meaning the interior space between the lighting overhead and the stage floor and the front and back and the width of the stage, and that's 40 feet wide by 30 feet deep and 30 feet high. And that's tied to what he knows to be, if you look across the spectrum of the kind of people who would use this premier facility. I mean, this is an amazing facility with the Pacific Ocean, as you know there. The people who want to use that, what are they expecting in terms of the stage volume? This does matter in kind of fulfilling that need for you. But again, it's not a hard and fast rule. But it really does support potentially the kinds of acts that could come here, but also just really simply, it gets all of the people on the stage well lit and in a way that people can hear them and see them viewed from the amphitheater seating. That is the goal. So the bandshell itself, if you look across this country, perhaps even the world, you'll see bandshells that span from traditional on the one side to very hyper modern on the other. But certainly we have to start with what you have and know with what you have. In one of the commission meetings, it was said, and I think this is accurate, that it has an Art Deco kind of influence to it, the kind of stepped shaping of that proscenium stepping back. And it is white, which is tying to both the pier bridge, and it's tying as well to some of the what we think is a historic architectural legacy here of Irving Gill, followed up by your Civic Center. There's a certain materiality that it ties to those things there. But it's interesting, when we step back many years to the first bandshell, it was a completely different bandshell. Much loved, I'm sure, by its community in the time, but it was even replaced by a later bandshell at the other time. But what I think is most interesting when you look at all of those bandshells, including the current bandshell, it fits so nicely into these incredible community bandshells across America that were primarily built at the beginning of the last century. And they were kind of significant architectural pieces. They were prized places, often in wonderful locations like yours. Not huge in size, generally modest, but certainly important civic places. And we think that's what the lineage of what all of these bandshells that you've had in history, along with the one that you have. There's one nearby here, some of you may know, this is the Redlands Bowl. Not a big facility, but it hosts an incredibly robust summer concert series. This little bandshell and this stage area and this amphitheater nestled into a neighborhood actually supports a wide range of things in a very sophisticated way with lighting. It's an incredibly popular venue with a wonderful bandshell that dates back, I think, to, again, the early part of this century. But again, it has that kind of architectural substance and that signature. So I hope what you can kind of see, there's a sort of similarity. We're again not talking about design, but I think you're seeing that these kind of civic structures, these places of pride, are kind of common to how bandshells have been created, both in your city, one of the original bandshells, and again, around town. So all these weird looking examples is us trying many, many things here, but this is not design. So I'm just going to present to you a concept of the bandshell, just for consideration, so we can talk about its general properties, not its specifics. You may say to me, I hate arches, I don't like white, I don't like whatever. But one of the things we want to put to you is there an opportunity, and we'll want to hear in the group discussion, is there a possibility for opening it up to actually see through to the ocean, to see through to the sky? Because much of the day, much of the life of the bandshell, it acts as really a pavilion within this important public space. So being able to sit in that plaza or to sit in the amphitheater and to see through and see the ocean and to see the pier, we think could be an advantage. And we have ways in which to close that for a performance if needed, or open it for a performance. But we think it's something for you to weigh in for us. Do you like the idea of potentially opening it up so it's not a formidable structure that sort of blocks this incredible setting that you're in? And then how it changes with lighting during the day, and then how it again supports the events that are there. And we do know graduation is such an important event here, and we really need to have it accommodated back here. So clearly that size and dimension I'm talking about is tied to precisely these kinds of events so that they can be easily accommodated on the plaza and the bandshell. So this band shell is kind of a simple design in some way. The concept I'm going to say to you, that slightly domed area, it's that dimension that's giving us the dimension for the lighting. It's bringing it to the front of the stage and putting it, it's not built into this model, but it's actually that dimension that gives us that clear volume that we need below the stage. Looking at it from the Strand, we're providing an accessible ramp just to provide accessibility for the disabled, but it's necessary to wheel equipment up onto the stage. Moving parts at the beachfront is a difficult thing, so just having a simple accessible ramp is there. And we've built in about 500 square feet of what we would call back of house for essentially green room, a restroom, some dressing rooms can be configured there, lighting and control panels, they're all built into that, and yet still maintaining that openness over the top. And then building in even additional storage. We've heard over and over again for all of the events, the festivals, that having storage on site available to you. So back built in under the seating that I'm going to be showing you is additional storage as well. So as I mentioned, that volume, what's important to point out, all of you probably caught it, is that extends about 6 feet above the elevation at Pacific Street. And you have Proposition A that I know you all know about. And that's essentially requires, were you to say that, yes, a recommended height is important to me, and therefore we would need a vote of the people, go back to a vote of the people for a specific exception or a specific amendment to this particular site for the band shell. That's your choice. That's not my choice. My job is to say to you what a recommended volume is, but we can't just leave that with you. We're going to show you an option that's reduced height and that's capped below the elevation of Pacific Street. So it works. We can make it work, but it's something, again, remember I talked about advantages and disadvantages. We can talk about that later, but here's a view of the full height. There's really a 6 foot difference, and it's precisely that domed area, if you will, that shallow dome that's accommodating that lighting. Here it is at full height, the recommended. There it is at reduced height. But one of the consequences of reducing the height is we need to add some additional pole lighting, because I simply don't have the geometric distance to get the lighting on the front faces of performers. So you see those slender poles that I'm pointing to in the slide there. We need to add some slender lighting that essentially lights the stage front. If you look closely at the Redlands Bowl, that's precisely what they do. The lighting is kind of outside, kind of looking back at the stage. Just a detail to talk about as we talk about advantages and disadvantages. So again, the lighting is kind of in the recommended volume, nestled up into the domed volume, if you will. When it's brought down lower, we simply felt that by extending that lower elevation, we cut off from view from the higher seats, we make the aperture, the proscenium, if you will, of the stage too small. Looking down from it, extending that eyebrow, if you will, to get the lighting out front. And it just made it bulkier. And the point of this option is to make it a less bulky band shell. So hence the addition of the slender light poles, which would provide lighting to the front of the stage. So again, looking at the taller recommended volume as compared, it's really a 6 foot difference, and it's for you to tell us your feelings on that, which one of the things we do want to hear about that. It can easily, again, support performance. There you see the two compared. Again, the reduced height volume, accommodating graduation, comparison side by side for events. So that is one of the options we're asking you to help us with your feelings on in terms of the compromise or the willingness to engage in a vote of the people to talk about Proposition A for this one location. Your choice, certainly not ours. Talking now about the amphitheater itself, the seating. We start with just the capacity. There's currently 1,500 seats in the concrete benches. And about 1,000 we heard from staff typically is the capacity of the plaza level or the Strand level for a total of 2,500. We're going to focus tonight on two options, an A and a B option for seating. Both are generally close enough to be basically the same. So the nice news is we're holding to the same capacity, even though we've had to reconfigure it for comfort, for safety, for code. But we've held on to it and we've added those wheelchair seats that are necessary for us to add going forward. So we studied 4 configurations. I'm going to start with 2, option A. And again, we're going to ask you to weigh in on your opinion versus A and B when we get into group discussion. But again, it holds to about the capacity of the existing, pretty much close to it. It shows, as I've been talking about, the code required wheelchair seating at the higher level and then at a mid cross aisle level. We do have to provide, I should point out in the corner, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, a disabled access site elevator. We need an elevator to get that. You have to get from the street to your seat, meaning to a wheelchair seat, from your wheelchair seat to the stage at the Strand level, going the other direction. I have to get you to the restrooms, parking, etc. We'll talk about it in a minute, but what is proposed is essentially a site elevator that you see off to the right there. So I'm going to look at it now from the top down, a kind of bird's eye view of the amphitheater seating and sort of take it apart level by level, starting at the top. So one thing we heard was potentially widening the sidewalk. And this doesn't mean widening and encroaching into the bluff. This means within the public right of way as it currently exists, just reducing the landscaping so that we can increase the paving. And one reason for that is that you can tell us your preference on that, is that there's a lot of people coming and going for these really big events, for Ironman, for any other of the ticketed events, any of the festivals, a lot of people coming and going that are constricted to a relatively narrow, in the current condition, paved sidewalk. And I would add to that, this is a performance venue, but it's a public venue, and I should have the right to not have to pay for a ticketed event and stand on that sidewalk and look down and see what's going on. That's, I think, so to give a viewing place that one doesn't have to pay to actually be a part of it, I think is an important part of it. So that's one reason to consider widening the pavement against this facility. I would point out, and this is a bit of our dilemma in terms of the elevator, because I know that's what everyone's thinking about. What are you doing putting an elevator here? But we're sort of wedged between the existing pier bridge stairs, which we cannot touch, and certainly the recently completed Beach Operations Center stairs. There's simply not enough room to sort of ramp us from top to bottom into all the seats there, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So hence the disabled access site elevator. But it does extend 13 feet 4 inches, because that's how elevators work. They have an overrun. So it's another structure that's actually above or extends within that zone of Prop A. So there would need to be a vote by the people to essentially allow that exception to provide disabled access to the site. Now, we're also showing with this option on the 2 sides of the amphitheater seating, 2 larger terrace areas, because again, back to the idea that a lot of people are entering and exiting this facility. So off of the public right of way, off of the sidewalk, there are kind of terraces for such things as check-in, will call, just the movement of people in a concentrated way entering and leaving a performance, we think would require that. So here you see a view of one of those terraces on the left with the site elevator, just for like check-in, for graduation, with the number of people that are kind of arriving at one time and have to make their way into the venue. So we also think it's just a nice way to enter the venue. You kind of come to that point, look down to where you're going, look out over the scenery, and maybe see what you're entering and move down to it. So again, distributing the wheelchair seating at a cross aisle at mid-level and at the high level, accessed by ADA ramps. Building in, we're now cutting down a level, sort of cut the plan level down. So we're looking at that cross aisle level that links the disabled access elevator to the mid-level wheelchair seats. And it's at that level we would build into the amphitheater the sound mix station. And we did that without, again, losing seats compared to existing capacity. And then going one level further down, well, I should add, restrooms are kind of built in under the seating. And these are restrooms, so people can just get up and not have to leave the venue totally, but just go to a restroom and come right back out to their seat, as would be typical in any kind of amphitheater or bowl setting. And those restrooms, when it's not used for an event, can just be shuttered and secured, so they're not open for any other kind of behavior, et cetera. They don't have to be open all of the time. And then building in some additional storage, because again, storage is what all of these facilities. When you get down to the Strand level, More restrooms, again, for the people that are in that lower section to access restrooms there and also have access to the disabled access elevator. So again, entrance and exiting, we'll call, looking at it from the other direction, those extended terraces that extend off of the sidewalk at Civic. But we did hear, and we did think it was important to look at another option that sort of has less bulk and pulls back those terraces. Essentially brings them back to a minimum. It turns out that that option, which we're calling option B, we will want you to weigh in on, provides even a little bit more seating, about 2,600 seats than the 2,500 there. So starting back with where we last left you with A, remember those big terraces, this option's all about just pulling that back to a minimum, just enough to get into the elevator and get to the ramps that take you to the seats. So it's reducing that by 17 feet, essentially pulling that back. And then the profile of the bluff is sort of, you see with those sloped planting areas, sort of mimicking the adjoining coastal bluff built in there. So this is a scheme that's essentially pulling back those terraces to essentially reduce the bulk. Here's the first option I showed you, A, with the entrance and exit areas for managing a lot of people, essentially pulling it back to as slim as it can be to just get you off the sidewalk, into the elevator and into the venue in a minimal way so that the profile can essentially remain very close to what it is today. I do point out both options do require the disabled side elevator. They do require that. So there's no difference between the two options, and that required amendment to Proposition A for the disabled access to the venue. So again, looking at it from the other direction, the extended terraces pulled back to kind of just the minimal dimension, retaining the hillside slope. Going through this scheme, the same widened sidewalk is the same. The reduced size area for entering and leaving, getting you down to the wheelchair seating or into the elevator, cutting down the level. Same story, but we're now tucking the restrooms in again under the seating because we have less room on the sides, but it works. And then adding restrooms again at the ground floor and additional storage. And you can combine this option with the reduced height amphitheater. So essentially you pulled back the bulk and the mass of the terraces that project out to provide access for all the people using this facility. And you can cap the band shell at a lower height, staying below Pacific Street. It's our obligation to show you that option so that that would not require, we have questions at the end. We did look, just to be thorough, because I know it's in all of your minds, what about this elevator? Why do we need this elevator? And why do we need to even consider amending Proposition A for disabled access? Why do we even need to think about that? It's worth talking about. So one thing we looked at was, can we just push this elevator down? Can we take that volume and push it a whole floor down so that I enter it at another level? But what that means is I need 200 feet of ramp, 200 linear feet of ramp to get 13 feet down to access that elevator. And to do that, I lose 300 seats. I lose 20% of your seating capacity just with circulation, just to get me to the elevator that provides me access. And besides, it's not a very friendly, in fact, it's a quite mean way to tell a disabled person in a wheelchair, you've got to go 200 feet trucking up and down this ramp to get to the elevator that's supposed to provide you access to this facility. So for those reasons, primarily because of the capacity and the fact that I don't think it's feasible for elderly or wheelchair bound people to navigate a 200-foot ramp, we think that this is not an option that's really worth considering because of the loss of capacity at the venue. As I mentioned, we also have a theater consultant, and he had an idea that said, could we offer a different type of seating, what he called terrace seating? Could we offer the opportunity to put grass areas on these flanking things with views of the stage so you could come a blanket or a table with your family and look at that? And it all sounded quite lovely, but I think many people saw it as an opportunity for camping at the beach in a way that wouldn't be allowed. So we also think this is something, and it had greater bulk, and that doesn't seem to be the direction that we should be going. So that's also not an option, but we just want to show you we did look at that and did evaluate that. So the two options are A and B that we're going to be asking you to weigh in are really option A, which has the larger extended areas for entrance and exit of large numbers of people from a heavily attended event. Both require, there's no difference between the two in terms of an amendment for Proposition A for the side elevator. So that's an important discussion point for you this evening. Both of them require that. I'm trying to point out to you, I don't think there's a ramping solution. There's not a funicular solution. This is way too much capacity, too many people moving at a concentrated point of time during an entrance and exit for other solutions than a side elevator. This is how you essentially are providing disabled access and ease of access to this facility. And then we also have you two options for you to consider: the full height band shell option, as well as the lower height capped at Pacific Street option. So turning now to the Junior Seo Beachfront Community Center. As with that, we studied several options. We started at the minimum, which quite frankly is where you started with me as a community. Just fix this up. We love it as it is. Clean it up and open this facility. So this option is really a renovation with no real structural change to the building. And I'll explain a little bit what that means a little bit later. But then we studied to sort of address some of the issues of number of community recreation classrooms, lack of storage. How could we make a modest addition and renovate the building? So we studied that. And then we studied a more significant addition. Remember that comment? Let's be creative about the roofs, that someone said, but a more significant addition, including a renovation, all intended to preserve the visual integrity of the building as seen from the front and kind of hide this increase in floor area in ways that you don't see it. But after really studying these and thinking thoroughly about all of the issues connected, that our solid recommendation to you is really how you started with us, is lovingly restoring this building to essentially its past, what you treasure about it. This is an old postcard. And what I actually love about this postcard is actually the plaza where there's community recreation in front of the community center. It's about recreation at the beach. I love this photograph. I think it's even interesting to consider returning back to some of the colors and basically bringing back the history of that. So now switching to plan to look at it, we are coordinating with the separate pier bridge project. So we do know that it's anticipated, not decided yet, that basically they have to create their own ADA ramp to provide disabled access to the pier. So they have to get down the hillside of some distance to basically get to their elevator, which provides access to the pier. So that's something that's being contemplated, not settled yet 100%, but being contemplated. So we, in coordinating with them, have shown that here. But in connection with renovating this building, there are certain things we absolutely have to do, and it's back to accessible path of travel and rendering code compliant access for the disabled. I have to get you from a disabled parking space to the entrance of the building. That's an obligation of spending any money on this building. So we have to remove that electrical transformer and create a safe passage along the sidewalk, code compliant from the disabled parking. We will end up, when we add the van accessible space we have to have there, we'll lose one space, but I think we have other ways to add to that space operationally in terms of the other beachfront parking there. We would say that part of this renovation has to include the gutting and replacement of the restrooms with, kind of new restrooms that essentially accommodate the disabled, but also have sustainable water fixtures, et cetera. And then we really can go quite a long way with cosmetic, non-structural improvements, repair of the building systems, even replacement of the glazing to let natural light into the building, to essentially bring it back again to an amazing version of itself, go back in time to its history, sort of back to the future, bringing it forward with potentially new windows that actually let light into the building so you can tell what time of day it is and you can actually feel like you're at the beach. Addressing with signage, the legacy, the naming of the building, making it more prominent, and even using the public art as a way, part of the wall that's completing the pier bridge ramp could be an opportunity. We heard this in the thing for public art, for murals to be created on the site, even I think a statue. Cleaning up the plaza and opening it up for all of the events that are programmed in the community center so that it is an effective plaza connected to it. So here you're seeing an aerial view. And so it's really lovingly restoring this building to what it was. And I think that is what we heard from you. Keep the building as is with many said a refresh, as many of you certainly requested. Keep improvements to minor improvements, stay away from structural, because essentially touching structure in this case means I have to rebuild the whole building. It's just like the pier in that regard. If I touch the structure, I own it and I have to rebuild it. And the magnitude of that is going to trigger a lot of things with your California Coastal Commission in terms of what we're doing. So by staying below the radar, if you will, there's a lot we can do with this building in terms of improving finishes, improving systems, putting in new glazing, updating it, refreshing it, bringing it back to a period where we give it new life for the next generation. We think that's our clear recommendation for you, to stay below that threshold that will trigger the kind of scrutiny that we do think will be an issue. But it's super important to point out that even we do all of that and make those investments in that building, we are still have an undersized gym and we haven't changed the amount of court space with this facility. And that's fine, can't do it all here, or would we try? And there is no increase in recreation classrooms. I can't change the size of them because, again, if I touch them, I touch the structure and I trigger essentially anything I touch, I have to rebuild. And at the sea level location that it is, foundations of rebuilding there and all of these things, these are the issues. So no increase really in the recreation classrooms in terms of quantity or size. And then the thing is, the building still remains at sea level. And so prudent planning for anyone really has to understand, what does that mean for us as we move forward? I know what it really means. That's off into the future, and it is worth investing in this building to bring it forward. We just have to understand that at some point there can be intrusion in there, and that will change the condition of those. And then importantly, as far as the California Coastal Commission, that projected by the year 2100, just a projection, there could be 7 feet of eventual sea level rise. These are just factors as you consider your investments in this building. I'm going to say to you clearly, 175 years, 100 years is a long time from now. We can really extend the wonderful life of this building, and maybe nothing will ever happen to it. We can extend the life of this building in the way that you asked as we move forward with it. So we do think that is the recommendation for this building, and that's a lot to do with it that we think is in complete keeping with how you said to us of how we can bring that forward to the next generation. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you, I'm going to say right off the bat, this was not identified as a community priority, a community interest, a community wish list, nothing. You wanted to do the amphitheater, or we wanted to study the amphitheater and the community center. But while we were at it on the study to be comprehensive about this, and the issue of how, if I said to you with the community center, I can't increase the number of recreation classrooms, and I can't increase the court space, we wanted to take a look at what could we do in a sustainable way that reflects sea level rise and all how one builds at the coast to potentially anticipate that. What could we possibly do at Betty's Lot and provide community recreation and public open space? So I'm going to start by just an aerial view of the lot, which is essentially 104 parking spaces when the Beach Operations Center is complete. So this is the same view of the study. I'm going to take it level by level. So we're right now at Strand level, right at the level of Betty's Lot. So those cars you see parked there, those are the Betty's Lot cars, right at that level, not below it. By reconfiguring that, we can increase from 104 to about 128 spaces, right at level, no change. And then essentially on top of that, move up a level, I build a park. I deck over it 12 feet above sea level. hardened concrete structure that would withstand the waves. Water rushes into the unconditioned garage, rushes out, but above that level is a public park, is a public space with 2 regulation cross courts and 1 center court there, outdoor basketball courts. So in addition to community recreation, and then pushed to the rear of the site, we can create 4 recreation classrooms at 1,200 square feet. So we can add to your inventory of community recreation that would add to the Junior Seau Beachfront Community Center, potentially 4 classrooms. Now, I'm going to stop right here. This is just a planning thing way out in the future. I don't pretend that this is anything that's on anybody's radar or there's any stomach to take this on, but this is just so that one can see what are potential possibilities. It's totally fair for you to say, that's not for us. We're not doing this. We don't need this. But I tell you, in terms of planning for the future, having a way that you can enhance beachfront recreation, you can continue the legacy of the Seau family in terms of recreation and open space being at this site, that we wanted to not leave this process just with that you can't enlarge the Junior Seau Beachfront Community Center and you're left with nothing. So this was just a way, and then on top of that, you put a terraced park down, stepping down from North Pacific. So here's an aerial view of that. Again, intended to just be a stepped terrace building that's essentially a planted roof over most of its thing, with just outdoor space, including a sand area for volleyball, for sunbathing, you could put an ice rink there in the winter. You could have a volleyball tournament at times. It could be additional stage space adjacent to that, and then obviously the basketball courts at that same level. Now, I'm going to say one more time, that's 1 level, 12 feet above the existing. All the Betty's Lot parking is right there below it, 128 spaces. This is 1 level above it. It's essentially what is done many times, building a park over parking. And it's for you to say to us that's of interest to us, to increase open space at the beachfront for our use, or it's not of interest to us. So again, in section, all the parking is retained at the bottom, the 4 community classrooms kind of nestled back to the rear of the site so we can maintain the vistas across the site. And here an aerial view of that from the side. You really are just seeing essentially the coastal bluff looking down from there. You really can't see it. And then from below, essentially terracing up. Design's not the issue here. It's really just the concept of sustainably building at the beach in anticipation of sea level rise, putting no critical infrastructure below 12 feet, no mechanical systems, no electrical systems, all conditioned space is up above, and we increase open space. We have parking and we have open space. And we think that's something that actually adds to, it's not instead of by any means, it adds to the Junior Seau Beachfront Community Center in terms of the community recreation and the meeting spaces at this site. So I'm going to pause here for a second. You'll have to excuse me as I navigate. I've got a couple of animations that just show what those 2 options that we're asking you to evaluate would look like as seen from beachfront. I'm sorry, from Pacific Street. And Brian, where are you? Oh, here we go. Oops, let me pause this. So this first one, let me get to full screen. I apologize for navigating this. So this first one is as if we're right on the sidewalk of Pacific Street, and we're kind of walking down the sidewalk. So we're starting at the community inner side, obviously the pier in the distance. So I'll just get this going. And this is option A with the full height band shell. And this is all about understanding the vista as it both exists. This is an existing, we're doing nothing to the community center parking lot, the community center building itself. We're doing a lot to actually improving its appearance, but not changing its configuration. Huge improvements, we hope, to the plaza to really enhance the utility of that plaza. Here you're seeing a rendering of how that ADA ramp that provides access to the pier bridge, kind of picking up on the historic architecture of the pier bridge in terms of its railing. Pier bridge steps, those extended entrance and exit ways that provide access. Again, that's the full height band shell. We're now moving along Pacific. Those wheelchair seats are just down below me. The other extended area, which you can actually, there you see the side elevator, you can walk out there, look up and down the coast. Beachfront Operations Center, or the Beach Operations Center, I should say. Again, the side elevator. It is a building, it's totally enclosed, conditioned. Stairs down to the Beachfront Operations Center, and then the open space allowing access between the open Betty's lot parking lot below and the vehicles that have to access the Beachfront Operations Center. And then essentially the terraced recreation of the coastal bluff looking out over, maintaining the complete vistas of sand, water edge as seen from Pacific Street, the new outdoor basketball courts, and then ending up in a moment at Seagaze Drive. The second animation is of the option B. Remember I said we pulled back the terraces and we have a reduced height. So now I'm going to show you that one. Whoops, what is this? Just 1 second. Oh, there we go. Started at the beginning. Starting again at the community center parking lot. The building itself with really no change to its massing or configuration. New plaza opened up for use to support the events there, the accessible ramp to get you access to the pier bridge elevator. Pier bridge, obviously itself. Now you're seeing not those extensions of the terraces, just the extensions that get me to those ramps down to the wheelchair seats and the reduced height, the band shell that's 6 feet lower. So this is the option B. Just need enough room to get on the elevator and get down that ramp. So those are pulled back. You see the elevator again, and really Beach Operations Center, and nothing different with regard to the study we showed for Betty's lot. Open again to the Beach Operations Center and the parking so people can leave and enter the parking easily. We have no need for a side elevator there because I have a lot of room to do ramps. So it's like a beach trail system that gets you down to that park and back up. I have no elevator there. So it's a super simple, natural condition, or natural is not the right word at all, but a condition that basically replicates a kind of California coastal bluff in terms of making your way down to the mid-level park and basketball courts. And then Seagaze Drive. Sure. That I'm going to just, we're done with the presentation. Thank you for being super patient. I know that's a fire hose of information. I just want to give you kind of some guidance on how we're going to go into the group. So what we're going to do, and Dara, I wasn't outside. Do we have people outside watching, or is everyone in here? Well, so this is where we're fast on our feet. We thought if there were 200 or 300 of you, we were going to have to use the courtyard for breakout space. Looking at this, I think what I'm going to say, Jim, if you're in agreement, we can stay 3 groups in this room. So rather than dividing into the additional 2 groups outside, we're going to stay in this room. So what we're going to do is take this room and just divide you into 3 groups. And all that really means is I'm just going to ask this side of the room kind of roughly to move towards this corner where I will be. And the corner over here will move to where Jim will be over here at this board. And then the back half kind of moving back, clustered around Brian Davis. These are all people in our office. Each of these places, each of these stations will be assisted by members of our team who you'll meet at those stations. And we have, as you can see, board images for your reference so that things you saw in the presentation you can reference. We have a flip pad for taking notes. And here's the first step, that when you get to those stations, when you just sort of pull your chairs around, roughly kind of come closer, we're going to ask you to choose a note taker from one of you to take notes on the flip pad of the conversation that you have. So that's the first step once you break up in. The second step is we're going to ask you to choose a spokesperson, someone within your group who's going to come up and report back to the larger group after the discussion that we have. So we have, we're going to allow about 5 minutes to kind of everybody push the chairs around to get to the corners of the room. So we have 3 areas on the project site. We're going to spend 10 minutes per each area for 30 minutes total, and then take 5 minutes to kind of just pull your chairs back around so we can kind of wrap up and hear our report back. And it's really simple. You can say whatever you want, but we would like to just cover all 3 of the study areas that I presented and discussed. And really what we want to hear, as I said at the beginning, what do you like? What do you dislike? And just as important, what are your suggestions? As I said, it's super easy to just say no all the time. It's really easy to do that. But it's really most helpful to hear what are your suggestions of how any of the things that you've seen tonight could be improved as we move forward in this process. And then we'll wrap up with a report back. The spokesperson will come back up here with the flip pads and summarize for the larger group. What did your group have to say? So this is the workshop portion of it. So 40 minutes, that puts us getting back, reconvening here at just about 7:20, it looks like. No, 8:20. So we'll pull back around at about 8:20. Thank you all for again your patience.
And then we can fix that. Click display settings.
All right,
One more time, and then duplicate slideshow.
Perfect. And it resumed the recording, so we're good.
So if everybody, you can kind of just pull back to the. So everybody, we're gonna. Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. All right, everyone. We've kept you here a long time. Let's come back. I'd like to hear. So we're going to start with Sherry. I believe you're the spokesperson for group with group 1. Why don't you come over here to the microphone and I'll pull that.
Sorry about my hair.
Ours was a group effort, so if it looks a little different, so be it. Okay, so we had some in our group that liked the see-through, the value of being able to see the ocean in the background and enjoy that. But on the other hand, we had someone who said the stage needs to be solid, not open walls, due to the ability to, well, acoustics, to hear the music, right? And pardon me? Well, the wind, sand, of course, and all that would interfere with the venue itself. Also, there was a suggestion to move the green rooms underneath the band shell itself, build some area underneath so that you can change and do that, and also add storage under there for the various items that are needed for whatever the venue is. Someone said they'd like to see food vendors down in this area. And we had a consensus that didn't the current configuration, the band shell itself has really no connection to Oceanside's diversity, right? As when you're looking at our current band shell or comparing them. We didn't feel that we were compelled to go to a city ballot on Prop A in order to build an elevator off of Pacific Street. So we were looking at options to be able to create that access, ADA access, without encroaching on building that would push us into a citywide expensive vote. Let's see. Open air band shell, reconfigure space. We thought it would be a good idea to put a ramp behind the Beach Community Center to feed into an elevator underneath or inside the pier area. So that would be actually access available to both sides of the pier instead of 3 elevators. Okay. Let's see, the stage steps, when we consider the stage steps, the new configuration of the band shell, to really consider the safety of the stairs. The current stairs are too many steps and too steep. So there was discussion about possibly handrails or what do you say, tearing them?
I think the comment was saying, do less steps at the front, just steps up the side and increase the stage area in lieu of the steps, the more traditional stage. Is that
Okay, thank you. And the band shell should be lowered to keep the historic value, which kind of goes with the one thought it was okay being tall, and there was a larger consensus that it was too tall. Did I get it? So the community center overall, our group was really excited about it, having it refurbished and prettied up for us. And we love the idea of the mural and the artwork over in the plaza area. We also think the additional lighting is going to be just great in there, refresh the floors, all that, just clean up stuff and make it new. We like the open space at the plaza. This shouldn't say dislikes, but we did think that we should really look at that ramp behind the band shell. Oh, Beach Community Center, excuse me. Okay, mixed bag. Betty's lots. There was consensus that basketball courts were great there in some rec area. But there was also others who said there's no reason to build over Betty's lot. It's for non-coastal dependent uses, which that area would be utilized for normally, a coastal dependent use and not a recreational use. There's a lot of concerns about parking. Betty's lot, maybe instead of having that second layer to go recreational use, but to actually put parking up there instead, because parking is an issue with a lot of people that try to get down to that area. A lot of people who have special needs that might have better access to parking and access to the area without having to get out and actually get down there. So that was pretty much it on us.
So we kind of went a little out of order. Our group kind of just said what we liked, what we didn't like, everything pretty much. Okay. So in terms of the band shell, we were a little bit mixed too. The same thing the first group said about we liked the open look of the open band shell, but yes, the acoustic issue was brought up because that's the whole point of the band shell is for the acoustics. So holes in that could definitely affect that. So that was something. We were kind of split amongst whether we preferred option A or option B, and some of us liked elements of both. So, but there was the comment that option B kept with the character of Oceanside. We're also, a lot of us liked the idea of the Terrace parking lot with the park on top, but we did have the concerns of parking as well and potentially making that park above, not a park, and have that to be more parking like underneath. Another thing that we were kind of against was having to go to a vote to increase the height of the band shell and potentially the elevator. And I think some of us were leaning more toward the 200-foot ramp, which I know sounds really bad. And I feel bad even saying that out loud. People like the band shell wings, the lower height. There was also brought up about shade covering for concert event goers that are sitting there. If you've ever been to an event there in the summer in the day, you get baked. And the idea was not to build a permanent structure for shade, but to use some type of canvas rigged up to just create shade for that event and then take it down. So I thought that was a pretty interesting one. There were some concerns about the sea level, also the rising sea level, also the sand and wind and sea elements on the elevator. That was another concern. I didn't like the elevator. Cost was, an issue. We're thinking we want to keep costs modest. Yeah, this is probably gonna be really expensive. Ramp versus elevator. Oh, and as roller skating and potential skateboarding area was something that we also thought would be good, even with an appropriate surface for roller skating, like, you would see in a roller rink type, or roller hockey maybe type rink. Free parking, I know that probably won't happen, but we would like that. Increased parking was important. Skylights for the parking lot, that was something that somebody brought up, so we wouldn't need lighting in the day, so skylights in the parking lot. So the terrace parking area that they were talking about, that possible option, pie in the sky option, the terrace parking lot, of having skylights incorporated. So there would be natural light in the underground parking lot, or the above, under the terrace parking lot. There was a lot of discussion about that little parking lot that's outside of the community center. Some people, a couple people were thinking about using it as just a drop-off pickup point. Somebody also suggested making it all disabled parking. Other people were like, no way, the surfers need that lot. No one's there in the morning, anyway. So we were mixed on that. There was also the discussion of having a phased approach to incorporating these things. So not everything is like shut down at once. And so we could see how things are going along the way of construction. Keeping vendors in the community center, also making sure that, not in the community center, in the areas outside the community center and in the band shell area. Public access was very important. Making sure we had native greenery and plants, so we're not having to water. We also I liked this, the old picture that was shown of the community center with the shuffleboard out front. I really like the idea of having activities out front of the community center, and because you can't even see what the community center is unless you live here and know what it is. You don't know what that building is. So to have activities out front, I think would bring more people to the community center. Okay, and then there was just the concern about if we got everything we wanted, whether it's option A or option B, the timing that it would take to build this. I mean, we've seen how long it takes to just get bathrooms here. I mean, it's been 3 years, we still don't have them. So that was a concern for us. 4th of July, okay, great. But that was like our concern, just how long would it take to build this? And then during that time, we wouldn't have access to these structures. And so that was a big consideration that we had.
Arlene.
One addition conversation I don't think I made before was that the idea of having like a full court and classrooms behind it. Pretty much, it could possibly replicate the community center for when sea level rise does actually take over that building. It would be another place where you could go and have some of those activities. It wouldn't be closed, but it would still be a place to see. Maybe at night too, right?
And that. Thank you.
Ours was a little more loosey-goosey. We didn't quite workshop things as much, but it was more of like what we did like and what we didn't like. So I can try. I can't look at. Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about was just the architecture of the building. And I know that this is something that we'll workshop later in different meetings. And we talked about how it's not this is what the architecture will look like, but we definitely feel like it needs to be discussed a lot more with the community and definitely have options that resemble other architecture within the community. Although what was presented does resemble a lot of the Irving Gill. And so that was cool, but there are other things that we would like to see as options as well. A lot of people like the open air concept, but we also had the same concern about the sound, the wind, the ocean sound during concerts. And I know that it was mentioned that those could be closed up for those, but we just wanted to make sure that whatever happened, it was the best acoustics that could possibly happen if we're going to attract better acts or, have people that want to play in the band shell. We would like to make sure that's addressed. Some people liked the option A and some people liked option B. I think the main concern with the taller option was how it blocked the pier and the view a little bit more. And then definitely that architecture needed to be differently considered. But some people said they liked that higher profile, that it was a better option. Option A with the structures and the elevator was I think we were kind of divided on that. And one of the things that we talked about was it needed better. Option A, it was nice, but it needed green, where the option B had greenery and native plants. Option A was just very stark. And while it had those great options that would let people go out and look and see things and probably a better flow for entry and exiting, it just was very hardscaped versus having any sort of greenery. Yes, we wanted to keep and increase the seating, but there was some concern about the gathering space, the flat gathering space that's there now. Just because we aren't always using it as a place for bands and performances. There's a lot more community gathering that happens there throughout the other times when there's no bands or graduations or performances happening. So that was a little bit of a concern, just having that space available. Design was beautiful. One person thought it needed to be skater proofed. Other people thought maybe we needed to have other options for skaters incorporated into it. So there's a little bit of both of those needs. I heard the want for roller skating and skateboarding and that sort of thing. And I feel like that was one thing that was missing. And we talked about how some of that could also be incorporated into the plaza in front of the community center. We're pretty random here. If you had to go to a vote, then adding extra height. Yeah, if you have to go to a vote, then add extra height for the elevator. We didn't really talk much about the vote, right? We didn't really consider that very much. So the elevator wasn't a big topic for us. Making sure the acoustics are worked out. The height, we already talked about that. Closer to the stage. Do the arches have curtains to block the sun? Yeah, how is sea level rise mitigated or addressed in the band shell area? That was brought up as a concern. Options from gatherings in the plaza, seating extension. Skate. Oh yeah, that was, we also talked about with the community center. We also liked the image that had the shuffleboard and other activities out in front. So we thought that could be a really good idea. Personally, I also thought the greenery in front of that with the native plants was a nice addition. We also like the mural ideas. That was a pretty cool improvement. But we like it as is with the improvements is okay. We didn't feel like it necessarily, well, we did have one or two people who thought, if we're gonna do it, let's really do it and go to the Coastal Commission and do it right. But I think in the end, we sort of landed on, let's just do it as is with the improvements because that's just a lot. Big concrete wall could be planted. That's more about the greenery around the community center. We thought that the new windows in the community center need to be able to open. That community center gets hot, and if you're not going to have air conditioning in there, then let's at least get some ocean air flowing through there. The sea level rise will affect the 7 foot higher. We already talked about that. Put courts in the open part of the rec center. That was an idea that came out. It's too bad it's limited what could be done. Honoring Junior Seattle is great with the mural and the statue. We also had a little bit of a debate about the parking lot. I don't think do we have another page? Okay. Betty's lot. Yeah, we had quite a bit of discussion about that. At the very least, we wanted to upgrade the number of parking spaces, which is happening. We updated to a higher number of parking spaces. The park above the parking lot. A lot of people thought that was a good idea. The surfers among our group did not like that idea. They like to change their wetsuits in the sunshine and not be in a cold underground parking lot. So that was a little bit of a concern. Having a covered structure on the beach wasn't good. Oh, they wanted to be able to see out from that parking structure. So they didn't want a bunch of columns throughout the parking structure. So if that was still open as kind of a window to the beach, that was important. Beach sand. Yeah, that was more about the park and worrying about erosion. Let's see, what else? 2-story, a lot of people just more comments about how the 2-story is just great for those activities. And we really liked the idea of being able to sort of migrate the activities from the beach center over to the top of the parking lot if we needed to in 75 years or whatever. So a lot of people were not concerned about seeing, some people were concerned about that blocking the view from the street level to the ocean. And other people were not concerned about that because they didn't feel like that was a thing as it stands now. So that we were kind of back and forth on that. Keeping the parking, open versus all boxed in. People like the additional classrooms and meeting rooms and thought that was great because there aren't really enough right now. And so if we had more, that would be great. And then opportunity for more multi-use courts. Volleyball would be awesome. That was one of the comments. I think that was pretty much everything.
So very helpful to get all of these notes and comments. We will certainly be gathering all of these. Do want to just open it now. I know we pushed you well past where we said we'd be here, but if there are any questions, any remaining questions, and then after that, I'll just again kind of summarize where we are with next steps. But are there any questions that don't feel like they've been addressed in the group conversation or here tonight? Any? Arlene?
But several people in my group remarked that how the presented to us tonight for refinement. And that you would listen to what we were saying and all what we felt as well as what we were saying. So that's
It continues. I mean, I think those that have staff, I will say, who've been working with this has evolved based on a lot of comments. What is done, and that's a part of the process. So we take serious. We've got a lot of information here that we are going to digest and try to put it together and understand how we will come back to you and meet with you when we meet again. Yes.
I just want to make another comment about the bathroom. It seems to me that in the amphitheater, you guys provided a lot of bathrooms for what, like 2,500 capacity people in that amphitheater. Yet, when you look at the beach, we literally have thousands of people on the beach, and we have these 12 bathrooms that service all of those thousands of people. And I think the bathrooms that are currently being under construction could easily service the amphitheater.
Okay, we'll take note of that. Yes. Yeah, it's a must, I think. Yeah.
At the next meeting, you're going to come up with other options as to what you came up with from what we gave you today.
I think what will happen is really refinements or notation, because again, I'll take one thing. Our team takes design super seriously. That's a very detailed process to kind of get at it. So I think we're not going to get down the road with materials and design, because that's really not the scope of this endeavor. The scope of this endeavor is to determine how much of something, how big, generally where it is, so that we can understand the general scope, the general concept that might position you to go forward in a design process. But certain things that we will look at that came up in the group that I attended, because it is something we hear loud and clear tonight, that a vote by the people is a high hurdle. It's a costly endeavor, and there is concern about that. And so I think it is important that we take an additional look to the idea of ramping down to the amphitheater seating. I heard in all the groups a kind of, I saw one of the notes, so what if we lose 300 seats? In our group, there was even a comment that, well, are we really, is this venue for the kinds of acts that are going to be so large, losing that capacity, or at least understanding the true scope of this might change how one does that. So I think it is worth, obviously, us taking a look, because we realize that's a very high hurdle but having said that, it is certainly, and I think I heard someone say it, she says, I'm actually embarrassed to say I want to advocate for a 200-foot or more ramp. It isn't, yeah, it's an extreme
Maybe
ramp.
we can redesign it so it's not 200, it's 100.
Well, you're getting at what I'm pointing out to you, because this is such a big issue and we hear you loud and clear on this. A vote of the people is an expensive thing and not necessarily a precedent you want to go down for any exceptions to that. So it's to basically take another look at this idea of ramping to the amphitheater seats and providing that equivalent access.
Right, all the more reason to be more involved and get more people in here to help make that decision.
Well, you're the people,
It's
so,
gonna be expensive.
pardon?
That's right.
Oh,
I think it's going to be divisive, and that will set us back. If we can, there's more of a consensus that we figure out how to do it without going to a vote, that would be more, people would support it, more. And I think that's.
One thing that wasn't was the hotel fronts are going to have an issue with late night noise. And I've been involved with some events there where we had late night noise in the band shell. And we had to shut down. I mean, 9 o'clock, pretty much it. If you're gonna put a big venue in there with music, something or other, with a headline band or something, they don't stop at 9 o'clock. So you have to, that's something to consider. So size is probably limited for that reason.
So we will take note of that comment, absolutely, that it is an operational concern that you have to embrace with this investment or not. So that's a comment that we will certainly record.
Excuse me, what is your email address? Because I'm gonna email mine to you.
Okay,
My email address is on the city website. And so if you could feel free to email me any of your comments, that would be great. My email address is dwoods, D as in,
Dara.
yes, dwoods. I should know this. You're talking to someone that's, yes, a little technology deficient sometimes. dwoods@oceansideca.org, O-R-G. And if you go right now, I did get some comments and I don't want to interrupt too much, but comments tonight about noticing for meetings, getting the information out. I want to let you know, I've heard that. That's something I want to work on for the next meetings. But right now, if you go to the main webpage on the city website, there's a link that says Beachfront Feasibility Study Meeting, May 25th. If you click on it, it will take you right to the study website. Has all the information on there, my contact information.
it reminded me, someone gave me their notes, and if you're willing to part with them, they're super helpful to us. If any of you want to, if you took notes for yourself, if you want to leave them with us, and we're happy to have them.
And
Yes, it will.
yes, and it looks like we're wrapping up, and I appreciate we've been here till 9 o'clock. So thank you for taking the time and being with us. I will be working on getting this information on the city website. And for everyone that came in, signed in, gave your email addresses, I can add you to our interested parties list. So that way, as updates are made to the website, things are posted in future meetings, you'll know about it. But we will get this presentation on the website. So while the information is kind of marinating, you can go back and look at it. And then, like Steve has on the slide here, the next meeting, we're taking it to Parks and Rec Commission meeting on June 7th. It's a special meeting. We're going to discuss this item. It's going to be an informational discussion item, very similar presentation to what we have tonight.
With the inclusion of telling them what we heard tonight.
Yes.
Can you do a day other than June 7th? That's election night.
I got a comment that June 7th is election night.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something I can look into and see what options we have for an alternate meeting. It might be a little, I'll have to brainstorm with you, Mark, maybe on that one. I will say I did check on the website to see if there's any conflicts, and I wasn't aware of any conflicts on that night, but we'll look into that, and our next community meeting was tentatively planned for June 30th. But I will look into that election meeting that we're talking about.
People be voting, that's what I think the point is. It's not like that it's a conflict with what the city has going on. It's that a lot of people might not be able to make that meeting.
Yeah.
Because they need to vote after.
And I apologize, I didn't know there was that going on that night, so I'll have to look at that. I'm a little embarrassed on that one, so sorry about that. But thank you all for coming tonight, and with that, I think we'll conclude.
Thank you all very much.